of these are growing, and it's certainly in our minds very clear that it's not going to be one player. It's such a huge market and such a huge opportunity that there is space for more players. And there is space for players both in terms of the technology and the product that they create, but honestly, it is going to be the execution that will matter. How quickly, how fast, how well, how do you scale up and really build businesses? The last thing that I would like to say before Rajendra sort of tells me to stop is really, I think we've seen a lot of technology entrepreneurs who've built products, who've built prototypes. I think the one thing we invest a lot of time in not only diligencing but also giving feedback to entrepreneurs, that just having a product or a research prototype or an idea will be very difficult to raise money on. Because investors, just so that everybody is clear, are interested in the technology and the product, but they need to see the business side of it. Unless there is a quote-unquote business, it's going to be extremely hard to raise money. And we also understand, on the other hand, that there are a lot of innovators in the healthcare system, in the ecosystem specifically, who are doing brilliant work, who've created some very innovative products. We've seen things for cardiac surgery, we've seen things for orthopedics, we've seen things for diabetes, all of those we've seen. And I think we would love to invest more, but there is that business angle that I think we need to bring in. It's not only medicine and science, but there has to be that business angle that I'd like to say. And the last point to Rajendra's question on policy, I think on a very macro level, there is money in the private industry. I'm very, very clear. I mean, when we send out an investment announcement, we raise money literally in an hour. I mean, I send out an investment announcement for 3 crores, and I have actually closed and raised the money in 56 seconds. So that, there is money, there's no doubt. I think the policy ecosystem, what we are missing, and especially when you see things in Canada, and which is probably the best healthcare system that exists in the world, you see in the UK or you see in the US, I think our policy ecosystem has not been geared or framed to leverage this private money in some ways. So how do you seed innovation? How do you seed really high-end product breeding centers, number one? Number two is, how do you leverage diligence and personal money or private money by the government? I mean, the reality is the government does not have the domain expertise that the private sector has. I mean, there are doctors, there are scientists, there are investors, they all carry that domain expertise. How can we leverage that? I mean, we have schemes all over the world where if the private investor is investing 50 or 75%, the government just leverages that diligence and comes in with 25%. And the last point is, I think, our patenting and our IP ecosystem. I think it needs to be dramatically accelerated and made more robust. So,
thanks, Padmanja, for making very interesting points. So let me assure you, there is no dearth of money. We have the biggest angel network committing that in 1 hour we can raise. Trust me, there's no dearth of money. But you need to have certain checklists, when you're getting into healthcare, you want to do and raise money. So we next come to a very interesting perspective. So entire healthcare system is about one thing. I can bet you, never you would have walked into a doctor's chambers and come out without a prescription. So the next important thing is pharma. And we have Sudarshan Jain, who is probably the top leader for the Indian pharma industry, share his perspective now. Sudarshan.
Thank you so much, Rajendra, and good morning to you all. It is indeed a pleasure to be part of this panel. What I'd like to do is set the context for more policy imperatives as far as healthcare sector is concerned. If we look at India, India is the pharmacy of the world. Every third tablet in US, generic tablet, is sold from India. So we have made tremendous progress as far as pharmacy is concerned, pharmaceutical industry is concerned. We have made tremendous progress as far as IT industry is concerned. Now, if we combine IT and pharma together, we can play a very major role to improve access of healthcare in this country. because whatever said and done, only 50% of the population in India get the benefit of healthcare. On top of it, we have got tremendous advantage that median age in this country is 27 years. So the point which Padmaja was talking about is there is a startup ecological system, and if we strengthen it, we can make fundamental difference in delivery of healthcare to the masses, which is fundamental for the growth of the country. I'll quote you some figures about the way the healthcare system works worldwide, and we are releasing 2 major reports in the summit, which we have got day after tomorrow, OPPI summit, which is IMS report on access and the pricing policy, and the second is on healthcare financing. Some of the data which I will quote: India healthcare expenditure of GDP is overall expenditure is 4%, compared to UK of 9%, China of 5%, US of 17%. But what is more important is in India, 70% expenditure is by private sector. In UK, it is 16%. In China, it is 44%. In USA, 53%. So it is the private sector which is playing a very, very important role. Public sector, by nature, has to invest in healthcare. The point which Padmaja, you were talking about. As a corollary, what is happening is 60% is out of pocket expense in India, compared to say 9% in UK, and 34% in China, and 11% in US. So the question is very, very clear and obvious. Can government get away from healthcare? And the point is very, very important that health and education becomes very, very important as far as the whole thing is concerned. We spend only 1% of GDP on healthcare. And if I see total government spending on healthcare is only 11%, 4% compared to 11 to 15% of major countries. So one point which is very, very important, although we are saying that we should increase the expenditure on healthcare, is it going up? And we need to get to 3% expenditure level. The question always comes in, where to get these expenses? Because it is very easy to say that government should increase the expenses on healthcare, but every time there are different priorities. But world over, we have done the study of healthcare financing around the world. World over, healthcare and education becomes a priority. So we have to find out resource to spend on healthcare. And the return on spending on healthcare, and maybe I will circulate this report, is maximum if the government spends on healthcare. It leads to increased productivity, it leads to increased well-being of the people. Second point is, we did a study to understand the access issue in this country. So if you increase the expenditure, where you should spend your money on, because that is very, very important. It is not only increasing the spending, but where to spend the money. So we wanted to understand the issue of access. We did the study along with IMS on 15,000 households in the country, and we defined access on 4 parameters. That is availability of the facilities, physical proximity of the facilities. Second is availability of medical personnel. Third is governance of this infrastructure. And fourth is affordability of healthcare system. Now, if we look around and based on the evidence which is there, the problem is not availability of infrastructure, the problem is availability of doctors in the infrastructure. Second problem is that the infrastructure which is there is not working. Machines don't work at most of the time. And fourth is affordability. The issue is, in most of the policy matters, we talk more of affordability of the private sector. But the issue is beyond affordability, because if the doctors are not there, and if the governance is not there, the system will not work in. IT can play a very, very important role in this whole system to improve the governance as well as capability building. First is, when we are spending on healthcare, we need to spend on creating capability in this country. And that is, medical colleges have to go up, and the way maybe we need to work on telemedicine policy where e-prescriptions are allowed, because we are not very, very clear at this particular moment that despite the fact that the healthcare infrastructure is not there, can we use telemedicine? Can we have better methods, regulatory system where e-prescriptions are allowed and consultancy take place? Telemedicine can play a very, very powerful role. And in addition, increasing the capability of the doctors, we can have medical colleges across the country, because unless I have infrastructure, I can have medicine, but there has to be someone to deliver infrastructure. That becomes very, very important. There is also very, very important area which a lot of work, maybe HIMSS will talk about, online pharmacies. How do we make medicine available when the doctor has prescribed it? So there will be a lot of use of technology, and online pharmacy and maybe regulation in that case become very, very important. HIMSS will talk about it. The last point is affordability. In India, yes, our medicines are affordable. What is more important, we have to invest in developing new drugs, new medicines that become very, very important. So from a regulation point of view, my suggestions are 4. One is increased expenditure in healthcare by government. We cannot avoid it. It is important that healthcare government has to step up the expenditure, and we have to find out the resources. Second is building the capability where doctors, we have to build the capability to generate doctors in this country, and use of telemedicine. We need to have policies on e-prescriptions very clearly defined. And we have to have also the regulatory framework for online pharmacy clearly defined. There are ambiguities as far as the whole regulatory system is concerned. Third is we have to create and innovate and encourage the system of startups, which can play a very important role in delivery of healthcare. And fourth is public health financing, in creating a healthcare financing infrastructure to provide healthcare to the needy, particularly in the chronic disease segment. I leave here at this moment with the next speaker.
Thanks, Sudarshan. This is excellent. I would ask now Shashank from Practo to share his views on what he is doing and what he needs as an enabling framework.
Sure, thank you so much. It's quite a phenomenal time that we're today in. I remember starting the company about 7 years back in 2008, and the whole, the situation today, the scenario today has completely changed. The most important change that has happened has been the number of internet devices in India. We would not realize this, but we are today the world's number 2 in terms of internet devices. We were almost, I think, somewhere around the 50th or 60th just 5 years back. And from the number of being about, in the world being about 50th to being the second largest is quite a journey. We had only 30 million internet devices in India in 2010. Today we have more than 300 million internet devices in India. That's more than the US. At least one number that we are more than the US in. That's phenomenal because of 2 reasons. When we started Practo, we were trying to bring in digital infrastructure to doctors and patients, to do many of the things that we are talking today about, where prescriptions can be digitally sent to the patient at least. Lab reports can be digitally shared with the patients. And many such things, many such initiatives. And we found the single biggest issue being that doctors did not have access to quality internet. And they had to use laptops and desktops. It was very difficult. And consumers too did not have access to internet. But the scenario has completely changed. So I'm glad to be part of this panel, which has digital as its first word, Digital India Health Summit. Going forward, the number of internet users in India is only going to increase from 300 all the way to 700 million. 700 million people connected by the same network has never been achieved before. I think that's going to be extremely powerful. And let me share why. I'll just narrate a small incident that happened a couple of, I think almost 6 to 7 months back. So I was a part of a panel similar to this, and I was on the stage. I was wearing a Practo t-shirt, and I stepped off my stage, and it was the recess. When I was walking around, one gentleman, very excited, came behind me and tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around. And he was, he was catching up his breath, and he said, you're Practo, thank you so much. And I said, oh, okay, I'm Practo, I have a name too, but that besides. He said, you saved my grandmother's life. And I was taken aback. I don't have a DR in front of my name. So clearly I was trying to understand what does he mean. And he said that for 2 years he has been taking his grandmother to different doctors, and she was suffering for a particular condition. And it was a very rare condition, and that very few doctors are specialized in that condition. And he said out of frustration, he typed that condition on Google, and one of the Practo's doctors' links came up. because the doctor who on Practo had cared enough to put that particular problem, the specialization, on his profile. And because this doctor came up, he realized that this doctor specializes in this particular condition, and he took his grandmother there. And voila, the problem got solved. And a very worried man who spent a lot of time now is very happy because he has a very healthy grandmother. Now that's the power of digital, where a consumer, and this person was in Tier 2 city, he was not even a Tier 1 city. And these people from Tier 2 cities and in smaller towns not probably have access to the specializations that are available in the metro cities. So this gentleman just took out his mobile phone and on Google just typed the condition that his grandmother is suffering from, and the answer he found. And there's a doctor who has spent 30 years solving that particular problem, and they got connected. This is possible because of the internet devices. And that's why I spent so much time explaining the power of having 300 million internet devices in India, and the power of that going on to becoming 600 million internet devices. I think the quality of healthcare will go up. I think if accessibility goes up, the cost will come down. I'm pretty sure that all around efficiency will go up tremendously in every element, be it curative, be it preventive, be it diagnostic, be it pharmacy-oriented elements, be it even doctors doing anything. So that was one such example. Let me give you an example of a provider. So 7 years, the first 4 years I had bootstrapped when angel networks were not very strong, Padmaja, 2008, 2011. Today they are a force to reckon with, and very, very proud to know that in 56 seconds we can do 3 crores now. It's amazing, the power of the angel network. So in the first few years of our journey, I had the opportunity to spend time with thousands of doctors. Literally, as an engineer, it was fascinating to talk to them because they had so many problems that could be very easily solved using technology. But scalable technology were not being created. Adding to Padmaja's points, it's products that can scale. And IT products for doctors were not really in the core center. And in 2009, we launched our first product for a doctor. Let me give you an example of how this helped him. So this doctor was a small practitioner in a very crowded place in Bangalore, but one of the most smartest doctors I've met. He had a problem. He was practicing for about 15 to 20 years, and his cabinets were full of medical records. And he literally was running out of place for his patients because the paper records were so much in nature that it was a very popular doctor in that town. After he started using a digital product, he was able to completely free up the space in his clinic. And because of that, he was very happy that one, his records are now maintainable, and it can be in a digital format. And he showed me literally cupboards of empty space. And he said, finally now I don't have to worry about physical records, and I can now depend on digital records. And that's how the power of digital is, where it can connect people, it can be of extremely helpful to even providers. And I can go into more examples. But just to round off on the question around what are the policy initiatives that one would need to further enhance the already wonderful IT revolution that's happening in India, the startup revolution that's happening in India, and the healthcare revolution that's starting off in India. If you combine these three, what are the policy things that we could do to make things even stronger? The first thing that comes to my mind is the ability to be able to, I think the biggest power is in making sure that the quality of, India is home to a lot of quality doctors. It's probably we have 1 million doctors today in India, 1 million doctors. The only 2 countries ahead of us are China and US. Now, the problem also is that among these doctors, there are also those who are not registered, and there are also those who are not available, they're not genuine practitioners. Now, how do we pinpoint, in a land that's so big, about 1.3 billion people, how do we find the practitioners who are not very, legitimate? So I think digital initiatives where we have the registration directories completely digitalized, so that with a single call, we can figure out whether this doctor is genuinely what he's claiming to be a doctor, is he or not. I think that will reduce a lot of injuries and deaths that are happening today because of doctors who are not practicing very well. So digitalization on the government front of the registrations and the elements there will be really helpful for the entire ecosystem. And opening that up will allow companies like us and many more to connect in and provide a much better holistic experience to the consumer. The second one is also, hopefully we will be able to move regulation and policy to add more digital into them. If you open up a policy document today, I think we should count the number of digital words that are there in those documents. I think being very fair, these documents were created in the last 10, 15 years. But digital today has become a very prominent force. So I hope that in all the documents, we today can see traces of digital, where people can recommend having physical or digital records. That will help go a long way in making sure that we can use this digital base that is being created and use it for taking healthcare forward. So these are a couple of points I think will be very helpful, and hoping to add more value to the discussion going forward.
Thanks, Shashank. Now we'll move to all we do in terms of financing, pharma. So at the end, how do you take these things to the consumer? So one of the biggest revolutions that's happening on digitization is the e-pharmacies. I have with me Hemant Bhardwaj, and I would like him to talk for maybe around 5 minutes on what are the things that he's expecting as a revolution in the e-pharmacy space, and what are the enabling regulations that he's looking at will probably help him or help others in this space do a fair job in terms of outreach. As Sudarshan says, 50% of the people have access. Pharmaceuticals, probably it could be less, because the high-end medicines or the medicines you need probably you won't find in the country. How do you make them available? So, Hemant.
Thank you, Rajendra. In addition to the e-pharmacy, definitely I would like to talk about it, but